We are happy to announce that this episode of the SWW show is partially brought to you by Humble Bundle. Well, not really. We are part of the Humble Bundle referral program, and we just wanted to say that if you like really cheap games and maybe helping charity pending the Humble thing going on, all you have to do is go to humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. That's right, humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. And you just do your normal stuff, and it just kind of helps us get a couple bucks here and there. Maybe it helps AJ get his lights. Maybe it's Mike camera. Maybe we actually pay Corey for helping us out. But again, if you're going to go buy games anyway, it might be worth checking out. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to these interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike. Today with me a special guest from, I guess, just up north, so not around the world for once. To get us started, do you mind introducing yourself and the game we're here to talk about?
Hello, everybody. My name is Victor. I'm one of the people making a game called Explory Story. The team, I guess the team name we operate under is Bluepin Studio, even though, that's kind of, we deal with different contractors and stuff like that, so some people are not part of Bluepin Studio, they're just individual contractors.
Nice. Do you mind? So for people who don't know or who have not spent time to heavily researching a Steam page, what is Explory Story?
Well, it's actually quite difficult to describe easily because there's not a lot of popular games like it to point to. But essentially, it's like a top-down, kind of a top-down RPG game where you run around on the surface of a book. So as you pass over certain words, as you interact with different words, different effects happen. So for example, you might step on the word heavy and a boulder falls from the sky. And so you spend the game reading the text, reading the stories that we wrote and interacting with the world, forming different sentences and causing different effects to happen.
So that's 100%. I think that's very unique. I don't know if I've seen that before. Where did I guess Bab is used because I think of, but where did you kind of come up with that concept, teaming up with that concept? Because as you said, and I think I said too, yeah, it's not something we've really seen kind of before.
Yeah, well, we were kind of forced to come up with something unique because the way this game came about was through a game jam. We were participating in the Ludum Dare game jam, one of the most popular ones out there. And, we had to come up with an idea for something, and we were playing around with the idea of, maybe there should be words that you can walk on, maybe it should be a 2D platformer, maybe it's a typing game, something like that. So we kind of landed on this, where it's like a combination of maybe a game like Don't Starve and Baba Is You, perhaps, would be the best way to explain it.
Yeah, I think Baba Is You is probably the best way I'm thinking of it, at least mechanically thinking of that. So one of the things I'm very curious about is as I'm going, I have like the Steam page up on one of my monitors and like a bunch of screenshots, trailers, stuff. How as a player, and then how as like someone who, when you're looking at it, kind of how do you know what words are interactive, what aren't? Kind of like what is that kind of cycle like?
Well, we wanted it to be more of an exploration, so it's not immediately obvious which words you can interact with and which words will cause things to happen on the screen. That's kind of where the Explory part comes in. So as you walk around, effects will happen to you, and the words are highlighted, and some words are not, some effects don't repeat themselves, so if you step on the word again, it doesn't happen again, and some do. But yeah, it's kind of a mystery, I guess, for the player, because any word conceivably could do something.
That was kind of what I was thinking too. Like even watching kind of the stuff, I'm like when you go through words, I'm like, oh yeah, but the other words, like it's interesting. So here's a question: if a player sees a word does something, does that word always do it, or is it still a level of like each page is a little bit different?
Right. So it's possible that it won't, but we'd like to keep a consistency across the whole game. So, for example, the word rain, even if it's in two different stories, it will always make it rain. So it'll change the weather effects. But we have plenty of words that are unique. So unique to each story, because we don't want to just keep recycling the same effects over and over. We have some effects that are shared across different levels, but the majority of the effects are only found within each individual level. They're not repeated.
That's very interesting, and it seems like that's one of those, we're going to call it content dense things that I assume is a small dev that you guys ran into. But so one of the comparisons that we started talking that you made was, so we said it was a combination of Baba Is You and Don't Starve. Can we talk about the Don't Starve comparison to the game? Kind of. So when I think Don't Starve, I think like a survival strategy game almost, so like a Minecraft-esque but darker. How kind of in this game would a person kind of, when you say Don't Starve, what do you mean by that in this game?
Well, Don't Starve. I reference Don't Starve primarily because of the way you do locomotion in the game. So it's kind of like a top-down sort of fake 3D environment where it's all 2D sprites, but it looks 3D. But also, we do have RPG elements in the game, like similar to Don't Starve. Each act or each section of levels, and even each individual level, will have a different gimmick to it. For example, in the first level that's available to play now in the demo, there's like a hunger bar, so you can get hungry, and as you get hungry, you slow down. So the player needs to find words that spawn food for the player to eat. So it's not as dire as Don't Starve. You won't die, and you don't need to. There's not a full crafting system and all that stuff, but there is some survival elements and RPG elements like items that you can have that will give you different abilities and different passive modifiers as well.
Mind digging into like some of those kind of like what are like some modifiers or items that like stand out to you kind of as when you're playing the game?
For Explory Story?
Yeah.
Well, right now we're still prototyping the items. We have 4 that we've kind of know for sure are in, and another 4 from each individual boss. But some item effects, like for example, if you have this one particular item, you get your viewport zoomed out slightly, so you can have more on the screen. So it's maybe easier to read, or you can see things you couldn't see before from far away. And on that same token, we have a different item that acts as like a magical lamp, which is kind of like if you can imagine a black light. So when you turn on this lamp, you get to see more words where there previously wasn't. So there's even more hidden stuff in the level. And of course, there's more basic stuff like increasing your movement speed if you have a specific item, and just kind of like keys to specific areas. So if you have this key, you can go here. If you have this key, you can go somewhere else, that kind of thing.
No, that makes a lot of sense. One of the other things I'd like to talk about is you said boss battles in this game. So boss battles, I think in any game are always this interesting struggle or challenge, because like it's that fine line of like, oh, we want to throw new things at a player, and we want them to use skills they had, but we don't want it to be like this super tedious thing. Kind of, can you talk about kind of your guys' logic behind boss battles and kind of give an example, even broadly if you don't want to spoil them, kind of what one might look like kind of in combat?
Well, the one I could talk about is the one we have already like as public access, because we like I mentioned earlier, we have a demo that players have been already playing, and in that demo we have one of the boss fights. It's sort of still a work in progress. It's definitely not a finalized version of it, but it's pretty close. The idea of boss fights in this game, Explory Story is sort of like a pacifist type of game where the players themselves can't attack, and there's no like guns or melee attacks or anything like that. So we had to come up with boss fights that use our core theme of interacting with words. So in this particular boss fight, different words spawn on the floor, and you can choose to interact with them or not by running over them. So some words might help you by healing you or spawning obstacles to protect you from the boss, and some words might harm you there's a word that traps you to the ground, allowing the boss to more easily catch you, or just words that straight up damage you.
It's very interesting, right? So obviously I think the way to describe your game in a lot of ways is this idea of indirect control, right? So you're controlling the player, but like you're then doing words to do a thing, kind of that indirectness. Was that ever kind of like a struggle, kind of when you guys were designing, or as you're designing actively some of these bosses or bigger challenges, kind of the game, to make sure this feels fair without driving people insane, kind of finding that fine line?
Yeah, it's a challenge. This game has been a challenge every step of the way, basically, because we have very few similar games to learn from. So we just use our general pool of knowledge across all genres. When we were originally deciding to make it a full game after the game jam completed, we were throwing around ideas of maybe you can shoot projectiles, maybe you can do combat, maybe you can roll, maybe you can dodge. But we thought that the action RPG kind of features were probably they don't align well with the rest of the game where you're just reading and walking around. So we decided we should morph the combat to fit more the rest of the game instead of the other way around.
Yeah, no, that's I think it's a fair way to kind of think about it. And it makes a lot of sense kind of when you're thinking about like one of my pet peeves, especially with like boss battles or more advanced combat, is like when a game just throws something that you never do at you, and it's like, okay, like I get it, but like it like then it like feels not almost right. Which seems like you guys kind of thought about that and trying to make sure it wasn't this jarring change of experience. The other thing I want to point out too is we have not mentioned is, so your game can be played in co-op and multiplayer kind of. Do you mind talking about kind of the difference, what someone just playing by themselves would experience versus like if you brought a friend with you on this experience?
Right. So the game is designed first and foremost to be a single-player experience. So we want the single-player experience to be good because we foresee most people playing it single-player. However, the co-op experience, instead of just adding a second player that follows, like they follow each other, and which should seem kind of just like a shallow, tacked-on kind of feature, we obviously have a distinction between the co-op version of the game and the single player version, so the levels are not the same. They still cover the same content, but the mini games, puzzles, and even boss fights function differently. One really easy example to point to is, for example, some of the text in the levels will be obscured to one of the players. So player 1 might not be able to actually read what's written there, and player 2 can. So in that way, the players are forced to cooperate because otherwise they might not know what to do if they were on their own. But of course, if you're playing single player, that doesn't exist. You can read the whole text.
I'm kind of curious, because obviously what that sounds like to me is, so it was like there's at least a change of the amount of content or how the content's delivered, obviously with multiple players. Was the amount of work that led expected for you guys? Because obviously in my head, sort of design stuff and program stuff, I'm like, that sounds like it was more than just allowing single player. It sounds like there's a lot more content changes and stuff kind of in there. Was that kind of, as I said, you guys expected this amount of work, or was it harder than you guys expected once you kind of started digging into how to make this kind of work?
Yeah, we expected co-op to be a big deal. For us it'd be very difficult to make because just adding the capability of a second player to join the first player isn't actually compelling. So we knew for sure it would involve having to redo all the levels, right? So we basically have two versions of the game. The co-op versions and the single player versions of each level are fairly similar, and in some cases, even the mini games are identical because we actually built the mini game for 2 players. Like, it actually works better in 2 players, so we put it in the single player the same way. But yeah, it is a huge undertaking. But honestly, every kind of step of the way for this game is a huge undertaking because we also plan to do localization. And as you can imagine, since the game is text oriented, the localization has to be well done. But it's also very tricky because if the length of the sentence changes or the lines on the page change, we have to move around all of our colliders and all of the triggers and stuff. So there's just a ton of work having to redo the levels for multiple reasons, whether it's co-op or translation.
I would love to dig into that a second, right? So localization in any game is hard, right? And in RPGs, it's very hard because, like, the amount of text. But your guys' text not only matters from the sense of, like, you want it to make sense, because of course you do, like, I know translation, we should want it to make sense, but it mechanically matters what these words translate to. And I'm actually very curious, because, like, in some languages, there's a tendency where a word might exist in one language, or it might mean something slightly different in a different language. Has any of that been a problem? Have you guys had to, like, go in and kind of change the phrasing of stuff to, like, accommodate different languages?
I expect we will do, but so far we haven't actually started localizing it, because we're going to save that for last, because we want to make sure we don't want to make too many changes after we've localized it, right? So we're going to wait until we have a more finalized version of all the text and everything is where it needs to be, and then we'll sort that out. But yeah, we need to be able to do it properly. We need people who can, like, we can't just receive a document with all of the game's text in Italian, right? That doesn't really help. I need to know what every word means, because if, for example, the word quickly was translated into Italian and then back to English, it means something else, rapidly, then maybe the effect we play doesn't make sense contextually anymore, right? So there's a lot of back and forth that I foresee with the people who are going to help us with localizing, but we haven't started that process yet.
That sounds like something I'm just going to wish you good luck on and hope the best. And yeah, because I'm just picturing the amount of stuff that go wrong. Because even different languages, obviously, you speak English, I speak English. Like, that's a left to right language. They're right to left languages. Like, there's just, like, a bunch of stuff that I'm just very curious, kind of how this will end up kind of working. But
yeah, we might have to not translate into Arabic and Japanese and Chinese because it's just too difficult.
Yeah, no, I'm just very, like, obviously, like, and it's one of those that, like, it both sucks and it both makes logistical sense from a size of team and stuff. But yeah, that's an interesting problem. But yeah, so as we're talking, the game is slated to come out in early next year, right? Is that still the case?
I think so, yeah.
Perfect. Well, I want to say thank you again for taking time. If people wanted to learn more or play the demo, where should we send them?
Well, you can just go to explorystory.com, and that will redirect you to our Steam page, or just type in Explory Story on Steam. That's where the bulk of our effort in terms of keeping that updated and keeping that maintained is. We also have a demo there that you can play now, and even the demo itself is getting updates as we add more stuff to the game. The demo only has a single player right now because we're still messing around with how we're going to do multiplayer, whether we're going to have lobbies or directly connect. But yeah, the Steam page is the best place for updates and to try the game.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for taking time out of your day to talk about it. And again, it is Explory Story, and best of luck on finishing development and especially translations.
Thank you very much.
The SWW show and all of its affiliate podcasts are podcasted by me, Mike Maroney, and AJ Losi, sometimes by contributors, including Corey King. You can follow the SWW show on social media at the SWW show, or sooner or later you go to patreon.com/SWW to help us out. Thank you. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.